Hello, good people. It is Todd Shannon, data scientist, social commentator, getter of buckets. And today I wanted to take a deeper dive into the leaked text messages with Charlie Kirk and the implications, kind of the fallout of it. Everyone knows that Candace Owens is out here claiming that somehow these text messages vindicate, in many respects, her perspective on Israel, that Charlie was abandoning Israel. And on the surface, there's an argument to be made for that. That's certainly plausible and certainly based on his words, but I think it deserves a little bit more scrutiny. In the last video, I basically took the opportunity to demonstrate that those text messages don't reveal what Candace is claiming they revealed. In other words, there's no reason to think that Charlie Kirk was going to suddenly become anti-Israel. There's no reason to think that suddenly he thought that Israel was some quote unquote demonic nation, or that Bibi was a demon, or that the state of Israel was started by Frankists who were PDF files who, sacrificed children in their, demonic sexual rituals. These are all things that Candace Owens believes. And she thinks that this one text message basically says that, hey, Charlie Kirk is pretty much in my camp. Nothing of the sort is even remotely true. So we talked about in the last video, if you hadn't seen that, I encourage you to watch it. Maybe I'll put a little card here if you haven't seen it. So we talked about what the text messages do not mean, but we should take a deeper dive into what they do mean. And I want to start off by just laying the groundwork for a very important principle that I think we need to all understand and embrace. Charlie Kirk, all the veneration, all of the adulation, all of the celebration of his life that we have done over the last few weeks since his passing is 100% deserved and warranted. Charlie Kirk was a great man, full stop. But to say that he was a great man is not the same thing as saying he was a perfect man. Charlie Kirk is a man, right? And the implications of that are that he is flawed, just like the rest of us. None of us are perfect. And so we need to understand that. We can take a moment to try to understand where he might have had some frailties and some exposure to certain weaknesses, just like the rest of us, without impugning his character, right? And just as a general contrast, this is the difference between someone who was honorable and giving an honorable critique of someone and saying, maybe there's some opportunity for criticism here and there without impugning the character of the person. That is the polar opposite of someone like Candace Owens, who every time she goes to point out where she doesn't agree with someone, she's always bringing in an accusation of nefarious motives or impugning the character of the persons instead of just saying, I think that maybe there's a different way to approach this, or I have a difference of opinion. Candace does not grant that benefit of the doubt. And this is not what we're doing here. There will be no Charlie Kirk slander tolerated nor offered here on this channel. But it is important to recognize that Charlie Kirk is a human being. And so with that in mind, I would like to take a look at these text messages, and I want to read through them, and maybe we can get a better understanding of what these text messages actually do mean, or what they might mean. So I have the text messages here, and I want to start by reading the first little segment here. Charlie writes, just lost another huge Jewish donor, $2 million a year because we won't cancel Tucker. I'm thinking of inviting Candace. Now, let's pause there. There's a lot of chatter about whether or not this Jewish donor, whoever he was or is someone who is trying to stifle free speech and free expression. And this is not specifically about Charlie, but it is about, obviously, this interaction that Charlie had with him. And I just want to lay the groundwork for something, which is that if a person doesn't want to give their money to something that they do not believe is overall productive, that doesn't mean that they are anti-free speech. What it really means to be free speech, anti-free speech, is when you try to use the power of the government to punish and mute the signal of those who say things that you do not like or agree with. An example of that is what the Biden administration, for example, did during COVID whenever anyone didn't parrot the approved narrative. They pressured social media companies to deplatform, to mute the signal, or to shadow ban, whatever you want to call it, people who were saying things that were not only contrary to their narrative, but were also, in fact, true. And when you try to do that, when you try to use the power of the government to say people can't say certain things, that's anti-free speech. That's legit anti-free speech. When you say, I don't want to give my money to amplify a voice that I do not agree with, that is not anti-free speech. I think it is important to understand what the difference is. It doesn't mean that the person is even necessarily doing the right thing, right? By saying, hey, if you don't take this person off of your platform, I'm not going to give my money. That doesn't necessarily mean it's right. It's right for them to do that. But what it cannot be said categorically is that this is suppressing free speech. That's not what they're doing. Refusing to amplify an idea is not the same thing as suppressing another. Okay? So I just want to frame that, right? Nobody has an obligation to give money towards things when they don't feel they are productive. And I would dare to say that most of you out there would not, in the same situation, give dollars to an organization that was amplifying ideas that you did not agree with. Most of us would not do that. And so I think it's fair to point this out. Now, what's missing from the context of this conversation is why Charlie Kirk wanted to have Tucker there. So this is what we don't know. Because it's very plausible that Charlie Kirk wanted to have Tucker Carlson at this event, and maybe he was going to have him speak on issues that did not involve Israel, right? And in that situation, it might have been perfectly reasonable for Charlie to say, hey, I don't necessarily agree with Tucker on the Israel thing, but that's not why he's coming to speak. He's going to speak on something very specific that has nothing to do with that. Okay, and then that would have been perfectly plausible. Or it might have been a situation where Charlie said, hey, I disagree with Tucker, but it is important that we have him speak because there are a lot of people who share his perspective, and we need to, on the biggest stage and platform that we can, have someone countering that narrative in real time. Maybe he felt like that was his approach, or that was a better way to deal with those who are of Tucker Carlson's opinions, which is, at the moment, a growing sentiment. So maybe that was the situation. And we do not know if Charlie Kirk specifically communicated that to this Jewish donor or not. These are the things that we don't know. So it's important to point that out. If Charlie had said to this Jewish donor, hey, we're not going to have him talk about Israel, or I just want to make sure that whatever he's saying that might not be true is debunked, then that would have been a different story. That would add some context to this, but we don't have that. But this is what we do have. If we go to the next part, this is interesting. We see, somebody replies, and then here's Charlie. Jewish donors play into all the stereotypes. I cannot and will not be bullied like this, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. Now, this is where we see that Charlie was really angry and upset. And then that makes sense now, what he said about bringing Candace. Because if he's upset and he's looking to get even, he's looking to, let's understand, this is why I set up the conversation like I did, and just reminding us that Charlie, although he was a good man, he is a human being. There is something inside of us oftentimes when So when we perceive that someone is trying to thwart some of our efforts, or if they don't seem to be supportive of something that you're doing, it is a natural impulse to want to get revenge, or to want to stick it to them. I know what I'm talking about. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Recently, I put on my channel a conversation that I had with a person who I considered a friend. And this person, in my opinion, went on to display some of the most ignorant and intentionally obtuse attitudes that I've ever seen. I felt like the conversation was 100% a waste of time. I felt like he was totally unreasonable. I felt like he wasn't really respectful to me on my platform. And there was something inside of me that said, I'm going to take this video and I'm going to chop it up and I'm going to amplify this to the nth degree, because I want this man to be embarrassed by his lunacy and his ignorance. I wanted to embarrass him. I wanted to put that stuff out there for the express purpose of making him look as bad as possible, because I believe his ignorance deserved it. And then as I moved away from the situation after a few days, I decided not to do that. I did put it up on my YouTube channel, but I didn't cut it up with the juicy parts where he was looking particularly ignorant. And I said, I don't think that's the right reason to do this. I just decided not to do it. And I decided not, I didn't want to rub it in his face. But that was my impulse. That was my inclination. And I think there's some of this going on with Charlie. I think there's something here going on with Charlie where Charlie wants to say, this guy wants to take his money away from me because he doesn't agree with what I'm doing. I'm going to show him. He thinks Tucker Carlson is bad. Wait till I bring Candace on and then we'll see. Is that the right thing to do? I don't think so. And this is where the counsel of this next person comes in. Now let's read the next part here, because I think this is instructive. Let's look at this. Somebody says, please don't invite Candace. That might feel good short term, but it's not good long term. In my opinion, like all groups, you're going to get wide variety of opinions. That nasty free will thing that God bestowed on us makes life frustrating at times. Now, why would this, I just want us to think about this. Whoever this person is, why would they say that? Why would they say this specific part? That might feel good short term. Why would it feel good? The only thing that makes any sense there is if specifically Charlie Kirk is doing this to get back at them. We all know when you want to get back at someone, you know, you want to get your lick back. You want to get your, like, you hit me. Oh yeah, I'm going to respond with hands. I'm going to get my lick back. Jesus says, turn the other cheek. That's hard. And this is what this person is saying. He said, that might feel good short term. It might feel good. Just like it might have felt good for me to try to take that video from me and my friend where he was ignorant and in some ways disrespectful and put it on blast for everyone to see his ignorance on full display. That would have made me feel good in the short run, right? Because people would have seen that and would have said, God, this guy's a moron. That would have made me feel good. It would have. But in the long run, what would it have done? What would it have done? Would I have looked back on that moment with pride? I don't think so. And this is the part of the conversation, once again, that we also are not privy to, just like we don't know how Charlie framed the bringing on of Tucker Carlson to his Jewish donor. We also don't know who this person is and conversations that they may have had in and around this sort of topic with respect to this. This couldn't have been the first time Charlie expressed this kind of frustration. And whoever this person is knows specifically that Charlie is really angry about this and that he's about to make a rash decision. But you see, this is where good friends and wise counsel comes in. This is when you talk about letting cooler heads prevail and stepping away from a situation. And that's why, in part, when someone tries to say that this proves something about what Charlie believed about Israel, the only thing that I see that it proves is that he was really upset and that he wanted to get revenge. That's what's really clear about this from my perspective. He says, don't try to get back. Don't try to get back at these people by inviting Candace. That's not gonna bode well. Now, let's just think about a secondary part of this. And there again, we're offering critiques in hindsight to a man who cannot defend himself. And I think, in part, the reason why I believe that Charlie Kirk would have been absolutely furious for this to have gotten out, because I think that this was a spur of the moment, a passionate kind of lashing out. But let's circle back to the perspective of the Jewish donor for a second, because let's just really think about it for a moment. Tucker. There again, I don't know what he was going to bring Tucker on to talk about, but is this Jewish donor, is he right to feel some kind of way about someone like Tucker being on their platform? I did a video back in August, and this would have been after this text exchange took place. Tucker interviewing this, Greek Orthodox mother. And for an hour, it was some of the most insane, dishonest journalism that I've ever seen. This woman sat there and lied. I'll put a card also in the video here so that you can go and watch that. The fact that a person who is a Jewish donor would be upset with Tucker Carlson because of his lies, guys, we have to just acknowledge that. It's completely legitimate. And it's completely legitimate to ask the question was, for whatever reason, whatever Charlie Kirk's motivations were for bringing Tucker Carlson on to AmFest, or whatever the platform was, or whatever the event was, it is a legitimate question to ask, is that actually the right thing to do? I think that we have an obligation. We have an obligation to amplify ideas and voices that are true, that are honest, that are good. We don't have an obligation. We have no obligation to amplify ideas that are false, that are in my opinion, Tucker Carlson is a bad actor. Tucker Carlson sat there while this Greek Orthodox mother, while she told lie after lie after lie. There again, video in the link there in the card here if you want to go watch it. He didn't push back on her. He certainly knew how to push back against Ted Cruz. Tucker Carlson is not a novice. Tucker Carlson is not new to this game. He understands how to extract information, even if it was for the sake of just playing devil's advocate. He had the opportunity to, when this woman was sitting there lying, he had an opportunity to push back and say, just for the sake of argument, some might say, hey, you're saying that Christians are having trouble here in Israel, and that they're being basically persecuted by the Jewish state. How come there are no Christians that live in all the surrounding Arab areas? Isn't it true that there are more Islamic areas that are actually the ones who are oppressing Christians? They're actually the ones who are pushing Christians out, who are martyring Christians? Isn't it true? What would you say to someone who wants to counter your narrative where you claim that Christians are under attack in Israel? How come no Christians live in the places where Islam is the dominant religion? Nothing like that. He didn't answer anything like that. How about when Tucker Carlson had a lying, dishonest worker who was supposed to be distributing aid in the West Bank say that some little boy was murdered by IDF, was killed by IDF, shot because he was, coming by just to get some food that they didn't have because supposedly the IDF in Israel was thwarting the food supply and starving the people, which was also a lie. And then this man gets on Tucker Carlson's platform and says, oh, the IDF soldiers shot this little boy. Come to find out some weeks later that the little boy was alive. My point is that there are a lot of people who are looking at this, I think, the wrong way and not giving the benefit of the doubt to this person who's a donor who's going to give big money. I can understand why he doesn't want to give legitimacy to someone like Tucker Carlson, because Tucker Carlson is not an honest actor. And I just think it's important to say, just because Charlie Kirk said he wanted it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was the right decision. Now, I'll bring you in close here for this final, because there's actually an interesting irony with what we're seeing with Charlie Kirk. And we're seeing that Charlie Kirk in this particular moment seemed to be vulnerable and angry and maybe making decisions, not because they are per se the right thing to do, but maybe because he's seeking revenge. And the irony about that is that Candace Owens is a person whose meteoric rise into the so-called conservative sphere was partially based on that very same impulse. Anyone who knows anything about Candace Owens knows that she started a website called Social Autopsy, that was effectively a doxing website for people who were, online bullying. It was universally hated. It was hated by the right for some reason, and it was hated by the left. But people on the left, she found who at the time she was very much ideologically in line with, the people on the left tried to thwart her position for reasons that she found dishonorable. They tried to come against her. They attacked her. And she said that because of that interaction, because of that experience, she, quote unquote, became a conservative overnight. And I did a video on this. It's called the Candace Owens' Descent into Madness. You can also look at that if you like as well. But the point here is that Candace Owens had her start in conservative media, she says, because she became a conservative overnight, but because of how the left attacked her. And she says she realized that they were the racists and they were the people. But if you think about Candace Owens and her MO, she is primarily, at that moment, in my opinion, was primarily motivated to get back at the people who attacked her and tried to kill the thing that up until that point had been her most ambitious project to date. She tried to do something good, and people on the left tried to kill it. And because of that, she got motivated, in my opinion, to get back at them and to say, you're going to try to destroy something that I worked so hard to bring, something that I think was a social good, and you're going to attack it. You're going to say that there's something wrong with what I'm doing. I'll show you. And all of a sudden, she became this conservative darling. The question is this: how is that fundamentally different than what Charlie Kirk did? Charlie Kirk had the impulse to try to get back at the people who he felt was trying to either hinder or wasn't helping his cause, or who he felt maybe was using their money to try to control him. That's what he felt. Whether it was accurate or not, again, there's a very reasonable or a plausible explanation where to say, it's not a matter of them trying to control you with money, but just rather them exercising their prerogative not to support things that they don't agree with. For whatever reason, Charlie Kirk took that as disrespect. He took that as being bullied and trying to be controlled. And in an impulse to try to get back at them, he sought to escalate, or he thought about escalating it by both abandoning the pro-Israel cause and bringing on one of the persons who are the most inflammatory and chief opponent in Candace Owens. But the difference between Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens is that Charlie Kirk had people in his corner of sound counsel saying, don't do that. Don't do that. It will feel good in the moment, but it's not going to work well for you in the long run. And let that be a lesson that we all have these vulnerabilities. We have these impulses, the impulse for revenge, the impulse to lash out, feeling the frustration of trying to build towards something and then seemingly having that be stepped on by certain people. Candace Owens seems to be still motivated by revenge. And there's something really odd about the especially heinous level of disrespect and negligence and absolute disdain that she seems to have for Erica Kirk, which I think deserves some exploration of its own. But all in all, this is why I think Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk and the implications of what's being said in these text messages needs to be explored. In any case, I think this is a good conversation, and I'm curious to know what you think about it. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Charlie, was kind of just reacting, lashing out? You think that if he had the opportunity to have his life continue without being snuffed out by some maniac, that maybe he would have come to his senses and, hey, cooler heads would have prevailed? Or do you think he was really off the pro-Israel cause, and you think he was done for good? Let me know what you think. Leave a message in the comment there for me, and I'll be happy to read it. If this is your first time stopping by, I appreciate you doing so. Until next time, my friends, God bless you.